Dude, what's going on here? Didn't you get the memo?
We did not talk.
I guess it was a great day for gradation. Anyway, I'm gonna leave now. It's all you, buddy.
Well, welcome everybody. My name is Jason. I'm one of the pastors here. And it's good to see you and to be here again. I do want to give some praise to Doug. I'm not even sure if he's still in the room. There he is. This is not Doug's full-time job. He has a full-time job with a group called Mercy Ships. And he travels quite a bit. And he has graciously carved out time, the time that he has to invest in the life of this church because he believes what God is doing here. And I don't take that for granted. Doug was actually supposed to preach today on a topic that even if I said it right now would probably get you to choke up. So I know he's got a sermon in him that we will get to hear at some point. So don't pitch that one or hit delete on the file. So your time is coming on that. But because of his travel schedule and the work demands of that, I said I'll pinch hit for you today and I hope that's okay. But I didn't want to take his, so I'm going to kind of do one that's a little near and dear to my heart. We're in this Dangerous Prayers series. And we're going to talk about another dangerous prayer today. And then we're going to kind of move off of that. Pastor Andrew's going to preach for us next weekend. And then we're going to move it. Yeah, I heard that. Andrew's wife. I got mine too. So anyways, thank you for hanging with us. You can always go back and watch these online. Some of you are joining online today. And I always appreciate that. But how many of you play chess? Got chess players watching? Maybe some of you are probably playing chess right now and multitasking while you're watching this at home. I didn't know how to play chess when I was a kid, and as with most things these days, my kids have had to teach me how to play, and of course, they keep all their best strategies to themselves, and so I get beat regularly. But I had to learn what the pieces were and that not every piece behaves the same. And I really didn't even, I was a checkers kid and I tried to make this be checkers and that didn't really work very well. And so I had to understand what each piece does. You know what these are. These are the pawns and they sit out front and usually get killed first. But the object of the game, in case you're new to chess, is to protect the king. Your objective is to protect the king at all costs, and the way somebody beats you is to do what's called checkmate, where any one of their players, if they have an open move and they can do it within the constraints of that character's move, if they take out your king, you're toast. Game over. Everybody knows that the queen can go anywhere and do anything, and that's always very dangerous, and you have rooks and pawns and all of that, or rooks and bishops and all of that good stuff. So it's an interesting game. It's a thinking man's game. Very slow. If you've ever watched sort of the tournaments, it's a lot like watching paint dry. But what you realize is you can't win if you don't move. You can only sit there for so long and look at the board and study strategy and figure out, okay, well, if I do this and then this and this. At some point, you got to move. Or you will definitely lose by default, because there's a time limit. That's a little clock punch thing. And it can take a very long time, but you have to move. In our lives, there's an interesting shift that happens at some point for everybody. I don't care who you are. Everybody has their definition of success. You have your definition of success. Maybe it's a successful marriage. Maybe it's a successful academic career, professional career. Maybe it's accumulating money or the toys or the house or the spouse or whatever. You have these ideas of what success looks like. You know, for me, success looks like moving from 2 phones that I currently have right now to no phones. That's my goal in life, is to get to where I don't have a phone. Everybody has something that they're working towards. The problem is that, much like in chess, you're so worried about protecting, not the queen, you don't have to protect the queen. You're so worried about protecting whatever this is in your life that you will sacrifice sometimes the bold move to play it safe. And I wonder about that sometimes because I believe we're all susceptible to that, particularly as we become more successful in the areas in which we think success is defined by. It's easier to kind of just back off and say, well, I got mine, and yeah, the world's a hard place, and wish somebody would do something, and we start making excuses for why, and we play it safe. We play it safe. So success can be a double-edged sword depending upon your definition of success. We want to look at that today because in our dangerous prayers, we understand that that's not what God calls us to. My kids, again, exposure from everything that they see. I'm trying to learn Gen Alpha this week. It is like a second language. But we went and saw the movie Inside Out 2. If you've seen the Inside Out movie, I see some heads nodding. You know this character. Let's see where he's at here. Maybe. There he is. Everybody remember this character from... He's a new one. So the main character is a 13-year-old girl, and if you haven't seen these movies, the emotions inside a person's head take on these personified characters. This is the emotion ennui. Everybody say ennui. Yeah, you have to say it with a little bit of French snubbiness, And this is how ennui is characterized. Well, everybody knows at some level, maybe you were this as a teenager, maybe something else, but it's this sort of, oh, well, I'm just too cool for that, and I'm so bored, I'm just going to look, Nothing really seems to get in and inspire passion anymore. Some of you, at one point in your life, had a real drive for something. And it's possible, even in your life of faith, as you have come to either search some deep things or you've made some decisions, you have turned things around in your life. Maybe God has even shown up and done things, but that passion, that fire has kind of worn off to do anything other than sit back and play it safe. And we don't like to admit that about ourselves, but if you look in the mirror and you look a little purple and you're starting to talk like this, perhaps some of that has crept into your own life. Apathy is not an option for Christ followers. You won't read it anywhere that anybody from cover to cover says, oh, just sit back. Let God do everything. You don't have to do anything. You won't find that. It is a relationship. It is a covenant relationship where God says, I'm going to make the first move. I want you to be my people as well. There's a partnership. And that's not just played out on an individual level. That's played out corporately as well. We want to see how that affects not only you as an individual, but us as a community, because we are called, here's your Greek lesson for the day, ekklesia. Everybody say ekklesia. There, you know Greek. Perfect. Ekklesia is the Greek word for called out ones. Not called out in the sense of country club called out, where membership gets you in, you swipe your card, or the people at the front, say, oh, welcome to, C3 Club. That's not any of the C3s stand for. It's not Columbia Community Club. It's Columbia Community Church. We have a different definition of success. And that's good news for us. But we are called not just out, we're called to something. And the thing that we're called to, when God calls us out of the ways of the world and the patterns of the world and all that, is to serve. We are called to serve. I want you to listen to 1 Peter 2:9. Real quick. It's this re-identification, a reorientation to who we are because of what Christ has done. Peter says, you are a chosen people, chosen, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. And he goes on, so that, not just, hey, what a good thing, so that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. I don't assume everybody has converted, has said yes to Jesus. You are welcome to come here. We want to be very clear about our gospel message and what that means for you. We believe it's a better deal. But if you have agreed to that, if you have confessed with your heart and stated with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, we've seen the baptisms as a public demonstration of that, you are now on mission. You've got a job. And that may be news to you because you thought your job was just coming each week and sitting and receiving and, that consumer mentality, and then you leave, and then we come back and do it again next week, and it's very passive. And the Bible never encourages that, to be passive. Christianity is action-oriented. And that can be scary. That can be uncomfortable. Because we tend to operate from a safety mentality, but also we try and strategize all the moves. And what we're going to see in the Bible today is that the prophet Isaiah, we're going to be in the book of Isaiah today, the prophet Isaiah was completely dismantled. His game strategy got wrecked by some things that happened, but it transformed him, it converted him to a calling that he would have never imagined for himself had he just been left alone to his own devices. The good news today is that you were made to matter. I hope you know that. It is a shame. It is a shame to sit with people at the end of life who are asking the question, what was it all for? Why was I here? What did I even matter? What difference did I make? What am I leaving behind? There is so much pain in those kind of statements and those kind of feelings. I want today to be a different kind of story for you. If that's where you're at today, I have wonderful news for you. And we're going to see how that looks. Because if anything, the gospel is a message of hope. You are not an accident. You are not here by chance. God has a purpose and a plan for your life that is way bigger, way better than anything that you could have imagined. So we want to talk today about how to move from inaction, that safety mentality, playing defense, just sitting back on our heels all the time and respond, and feel and overwhelm and exhaustion and all that stuff, to getting on the balls of our feet and saying, okay, God, ready to move. What do you got? You see the difference there? This is a different kind of position in the life of faith. But we want to move from this to this. You with me? Let's see how it works out. Okay. Isaiah chapter 6. You can look in the app. We'll have the words posted up here. I'm going to read out of the print Bible today. Isaiah is a big book, and a real quick internet search will tell you that there's a lot of different theories about how things were for Isaiah, who wrote it, what the length of time, all this stuff. One of the big things that you need to understand in a book like this, these prophetic books seem very enigmatic and sort of like, what's going on? I don't understand all this imagery. Settle down. It's okay. The biggest help for me as I look at the book of Isaiah is to understand that not every chapter is written chronologically. So we're going to look in Isaiah chapter 6 today, which to me seems like it should be chapter 1. And again, as I was reading it and I'm asking God all these questions, God basically said, get over it, just focus here. Okay. So I want to start at Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1, and treat it as if it's the beginning of the story, okay? So come with me for just a second. Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1. The heading you might have says Isaiah's commission, co-mission. It's right in the title. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on the throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. We got to stop right there before we get any further. Unless you have done some deep dives in this, you don't know who King Uzziah is. He was the 10th king of Judah. When Judah and Israel were divided, even scholars disagree on whether this guy was a good guy or a bad guy, which suggests to me he was probably a little of both. Where they seemed to land was the fact that his pride got in the way. He did experience a level of success and prosperity and peace that caused him to relax. And he began to do some things that priests were not supposed to do, like to operate as a priest. Well, he wasn't a priest. And the common understanding is that because of that, God inflicted him with something called leprosy. Not leopardcy, it's not leopard spots, but it's a flesh-eating bacteria. We have things like that in the modern day. And there was no getting back from it. That this was God's punishment for pride. And so the other thing that was interesting, I'd never considered this before, the people who get all into the numbers and look at this, when they say King Uzziah died, the numbers don't add up. And so did he physically die, or did that sentence of leprosy become for him a death sentence? If you go to the doctor and you get diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, that feels like a death sentence, people have told me. If you get some inoperable whatever that just hits you out of the blue like a truck, that feels like a death sentence. So it's possible that Uzziah didn't die right away, but whatever he had would have forced him out of the community, would have taken the throne away from him, and so it felt like a death. The other thing you wouldn't necessarily know is that King Uzziah and Isaiah were first cousins. This wasn't just turning on your news app in the morning and going, oh yeah, King Uzziah died. Some distant politician, some figurehead we've never known. These were kids that grew up together. Uzziah took the throne when he was 16 years old. And so it's possible that Uzziah and Isaiah knew each other as kids growing up together. This was a deep cut for Isaiah, regardless of how it went. In the year King Uzziah died, that's how Isaiah is marking time as the big thing that shook his world. I don't know if you've had those big things shake your world. The things that you've put confidence in to say, oh yeah, well God, it's going to be all smooth sailing and all this stuff. Every one of us at some point in your life, I think in order for you to grow, is going to have the Uzziah in your life die. That dream, that hope of prosperity and everything's just going to be great all the way. I think that's going to get taken out from under you at some point. I do not like that. I do not wish that on anybody, but it happens. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. I got 3 calls this weekend of people whose King Uzziah is dying. It's there. The question is, when it happens, then what? And so the scripture says that that's the moment. That's the time. Isaiah was in a completely different place. His reality was wrecked, his paradigm. He had to start over. And that's when he saw the Lord. I don't know if he was a churchgoer at this point. We don't have any idea what Isaiah's backstory is. Apart from when Uzziah died, Isaiah went to church. And he was in the temple. Maybe that's why you're here today. You're needing God to say something to you, do something to you, reveal himself to you. And what Isaiah saw that day was the Lord. I don't know if they were singing worship songs. I don't know if the drummer was just really into it or whatever. But Isaiah saw the Lord seated on the throne, the train of his robe. You can go on Google and look at some of the artist's image of what that might look like. It was impressive. Train of his robe filled the temple. Let's go on, verse 2. I want to keep going here with the story. Above him, above the Lord, were seraphim, angels. But listen to these angels. It's not like the cute little cherubs with the tiny wings. Seraphim, each with 6 wings. 6. With 2 wings, they covered their faces. With 2, they covered their feet. And with 2, they were flying. You ever seen anything like that? I haven't. And they were calling to one another. This is a vision of heaven, folks. Isaiah has a front row seat to the throne of God. They were calling, holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. At the sound of their voices, this wasn't just some melodic little boys' choir. At the sound of their voices, the doorposts and threshold shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Now, here's what Isaiah says after all of that. Oh, okay. No. Some of you believe me. Stop it. What does he say? Verse 4. Verse 5, woe to me. I cried, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Let's hold up for just a second. Notice what's interesting. In all of this happening, Isaiah coming into the temple, who makes the first move? God. God is the one who initiates this whole interaction. He shows up. He chooses to do so. Isaiah was nothing special. Some of you come to church and you tell yourselves that, well, I'm here, but you think so low of yourself. And what God wanted to do is come and lay all his cards on the table for Isaiah and say, look, see me. Get a vision of me. Don't reduce me down to somebody who, you invoke before you eat or go to bed. See me for who I am. Get a bigger vision of who I am. And so that's what he does. he calls Isaiah to himself. We call it worship. Another way to think about it is worthship. It's one thing to just come and sing songs we know, and that's all nice, but think about what you are saying. We are acknowledging everything that is true about God, but we're also acknowledging everything that's true about ourselves. Because just a few words into any worship song, you'll go, whoa, I'm not that. I'm not that, you are. I'm not that, you are. I can't do that, you can. I'm not that strong, you are. Not to berate us, not so we just feel like, oh, there's no hope, but so that we get perspective. Because honestly, in our society, most people think they're pretty okay. They don't think there's that much, oh yeah, maybe I got a little, little addiction, a little hang-up problem, a little, whatever. Oh no, it's far worse than you think. The gap is wide, the divide is wide. And that's what happens during worship. Is it gets us to a point where we have to say, just like Isaiah did, woe is me. I'm a man of unclean lips. And I live in this culture, right, that just chases its own pursuits. The worship of that day had become really just disconnected from any kind of social issues. They could melt the roof off the place with their songs and their acts and all this stuff. But widows and orphans were being left destitute. There was no justice. There was a disconnect between what they were singing and how they were living. They probably were hoping somebody else was going to take care of those things too. And God was saying, no, this is a problem. You have to bring those things back together. They had lost their way because they were so caught up in their own pursuits, just like Uzziah. We're no different. We could say, oh, that would never happen to me. It happens to everybody. We get caught up on our own stuff, and little by little by little, that fire starts to go out. But this is what God is inviting Isaiah as he brings him in. But it's for a purpose, because what happens next? Verse 6. Then one of the seraphim, the angels, flew to me with a live coal in his hand. Do not try this at home. Which he had taken with tongs from the altar. So the altar had these live, hot, burning coals. Took one from the altar, and then what did he do? With it, he touched my mouth. Again, don't try that at home. But what did the angel say? See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for. This is the good news of the gospel, folks. If we believe in our hearts, confess with our mouth, we are saved. We are new. We are forgiven. We don't live with the weight of guilt and shame and sin. We are redeemed. We're bought back. We are changed by God, not just to sit on the mantle for the rest of our lives and go, oh, whew, glad that's over. Look how clean and shiny I am. No, it's to be useful for a purpose. But what happens after that? He's getting them ready. That's what that purification was for, is preparation. If God has done a work in your life to clean you up and you're like, man, I used to cuss like a sailor and I don't do that anymore. I used to do this and I don't do that anymore. I'm a new person, right? You are being prepared for something, not to draw attention to yourself, but to give God glory for what God can do in and through you. That's what it's for. Now, some people right here, the wheels fall off because they think, oh, I was talking to somebody last week. They're on fire because they know God is doing this, but they're self-doubting because they don't know enough. They don't have enough scripture background or time, just in ministry and all that stuff. But look, God doesn't call the prepared. We've heard this before. You said it, April. God doesn't call the prepared. He does what? He prepares the called. And guess what? All of you are called. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you have been called. Don't you worry about what you know or don't know, what you've experienced or haven't experienced. If you've been cleaned up, if God has touched your lips, washed that sin away, you are a new creation for use in God's purposes and God's kingdoms. But here's how this passage ends. Verse 8. After all this has happened, right, this thing that Isaiah could have never done for himself, and the affirmation of that forgiveness. Then I heard the voice of the Lord say, whom shall I send? There it is. And who will go for us? You know what God doesn't say? He doesn't get very specific about the mission. He just says, who have I got? Who's there? Who am I going to send? Isaiah doesn't say, well, send where? What? I need more info. And yet he's willing at that moment to respond with this. Here I am, or here am I, send someone else. Send richer people. Send the government. Send me. God's call on your life is so purposeful, so unique to you. He does not go to all this trouble for you to sit back and go, well, I'll think about it. I need some more information, God. You're really going to have to, show me a little more. I'll think about it for a little while. No. He just says, send me, whatever it is. Whatever it is. One of our staff members, we found out her husband's gotten called up from reserves. And he's going to be on a tour here for the next 6 months, asterisk, kind of however long. You know what he doesn't have the luxury of doing is asking a whole bunch. His response has to be, sir, yes, sir. And off he goes. He doesn't get all of the information. He has made an agreement that says, if you call me, I will go. And he's going to go. He has enlisted in that kind of service. Folks, I don't know what your paradigm of Christianity is, but we're in a war. And every soldier knows when you enlist, you're not enlisting so you can kick back on the beach somewhere and ride it out. You have training, you have preparation, and you have to know that everything you're doing is to get you ready for war. Spiritual battle is no less different. And you cannot sit back on your heels and say you are ready. Doesn't work that way. But Isaiah was so moved, so transformed. This was his conversion experience. I don't know what your conversion experience was like. Everybody's got a little different taste of that. But this was so moving, so powerful for him that his response, here am I, send me, was basically, how can I not? How can I sit here? How can I wallow in King Uzziah? How can I do anything other than abandon my strategy and do exactly what you say to do? You have to move. You have to move. With all of that laid out in front of you, you cannot sit. I cannot sit and say I'm doing the Christian life, that I'm living by faith. That's not faith. If your faith feels stagnant, I wonder if there's something along that process that has broken down for you. But here's the deal. The moment you step into your calling, and that's what we call it. I know other faith groups talk about a calling, and basically it's a bishop calling you up and saying, here's what you're going to do. And you really don't have an option. But no, this is God. We cut out the middleman. God is calling you. And some of you know it already. This is the hard part. Some of you already know it, and you're afraid. You're afraid to do it because you're not quite sure how it's all going to work out. But you already know. And it bugs you. Because you want to, but you're not sure. You're just not sure. Listen, folks, it just gets this simple. The moment you step into your calling, you step out of your comfort. You got to burn the ships. It's a whole new ball game. But you won't know what life is until you do. It reminds me of that old song. I was thinking about it this week. Out along the edges, always where I yearn to be, burn to be. The further on the edge, the hotter the intensity. Sing it with me. Highway to the danger zone. Oh, sing it. Right into the danger zone. Right? It's from Top Gun. Sorry, some of you need to get out and go watch a movie. Listen. Your calling always costs. It always costs. I've made peace with the fact, not to get fatalistic, but I've made peace with the fact that it should not surprise anybody if I die a little bit early from signing up for what I've signed up to do. I believe this work has taken years off my life, and I'm okay with that. Not because I want to miss graduations or grandkids, all that stuff. I have just said yes to something so grand that God has done such a work. He's made himself so real in my life that it is totally worth it. His people are worth it. This world is worth it. And I'm not the savior of the world. Jesus did all that work. But I came to him, and he gave me a new life and a new assignment, and he made my life matter, and he wants to do that for you. That's what he promised. That's why he sacrificed everything, so that when we accept him, we can leave our old ways behind. But not so that life gets easier. It's that we have life at all. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, there's a movie coming out about him. I hope you'll go watch it. But he wrote a fantastic book called The Cost of Discipleship. And here's what he says in this book. He says, cheap grace, he talks about the difference between cheap grace, costly grace. Cheap grace is the grace we bestow on ourselves. Oh yeah, they're there. Cheap grace is preaching of forgiveness without requiring repentance. You got to change some things. If you say yes to Jesus, you have to turn from doing this to now going this way. Repentance. What's he say next? Baptism without church discipline. It's not just the symbol, it's walking in this new life. Communion without confession. To plead before God for mercy. Baptism, communion without discipline. Cheap grace is grace without discipleship. Grace without the cross. Grace without Jesus Christ, living and incarnate. None of these things are just add-ons. When God shows up and does a work in your life, there's a whole transformation that has to occur. Have you been changed by the gospel? Or is it just nice to know? But it kind of just stays in your back pocket. This is a heavy one. I don't like this, but I've had to do this myself and just look and say, okay, am I playing it too safe? The tendency, like I say, is to be afraid, to sit back and go, oh no, this is too big for me. Of course it's too big for you. God didn't say, well, here's your assignment. Good luck. I'll be over here, waiting to see how it goes. No, God will never call you to do something he won't also lead you through. Reminds me of another old song, not movie related. Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Christ, the royal banner, leads against the foe forward into battle. Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war with the cross of Jesus going on before, like a mighty army. You ever thought of yourself that way in the church? Moves the church of God. Children, we are treading where the saints have trod. We step on some big shoulders around here, people who have demonstrated this for their whole life. We're not divided. All one body. We vote different, we live different, we spend different. We are one body. One in hope and doctrine and charity, love. Crowns and thrones may perish, kingdoms rise and wane, but the church of Jesus, constant, will remain. Sometimes your calling is to stay put in your job, with your family, at your school. It's to stay put and remain faithful to what God has already done for you. Maybe it's just seeing those things with new eyes as a mission field that you haven't seen before. Gates of hell can never against the church prevail. We have Christ's own promise, and that cannot fail. Jesus has done all the work. God has shown up. He has made himself known in the person of Jesus Christ. You cannot look at him, you cannot look at the cross and walk away indifferent. It must move you into something, not into a position of safety, but you are always led and you are always protected when you remain loyal. Loyalty is our highest calling. Look at Paul as he's wrapping up Ephesians 4, chapter 1. As a prisoner for the Lord, Paul didn't play it safe. He says, he writes from prison, as a prisoner for the Lord, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. So the question really isn't, are you called? The answer is yes. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, the answer is yes. The question is, are you moving? Are you staying put? You may not feel ready. You may not feel qualified. You may feel I'm too young, I'm too old, I'm too whatever. Nope. You're still on the board. And there's work to do because we absolutely have an enemy who will one day be defeated. But it's a war until then, folks. Don't think any less of that. What is holding you back today? Maybe it's just, you're like, man, I just can't. You've made so many excuses that's just become the norm. You've told yourself you just can't lean into that. What if you couldn't not? It may be some difficult conversations in your home and your family. Everybody got one of these cards on their seat today. I don't want to see one of these in the trash can. Not one. Got a QR code on the back. If you don't know what a QR code is, go find a young person and just say, teach me how to use this. You hold your phone up to it, it sends you to a link. Check it out. Take action today to serve, to engage, to move from back on your heels to the balls of your feet. Say, God, I don't even know what I'm doing, but you are leading. One of my favorite people in this whole church came in this morning with oxygen on in her wheelchair. She says, I'm ready to serve. I'm here. I just celebrated my birthday, and she's got a reason to celebrate, but she chose to be here. She's doing your job. Would you join her? Would you see a grander vision of what God can do through little old you and me to accomplish his purposes? We're going to sing and just celebrate. With every breath in our lungs, we have this opportunity. God is so good to us to give us his grace. Would you stand with me? We're just going to declare that this morning. I'm excited to see what God is going to do through his people.